Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We have quorum, so we will call the meeting to order. And first, I'll say that we are meeting virtually during the COVID-19 emergency, and you can check the city website for current details of the COVID-19 service impacts. And meetings can also be viewed, as always, via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. I will also say that the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact csc@london.ca. With that, I will look for disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we have 2 items on the consent agenda: the compliance report in accordance with procurement of goods and services and procurement in emergencies update 3. Do I have a mover for those, or would you like to deal with them separately? Councillor Van Holst.
I can move those items, Madam Chair.
Great. And will you second that, Deputy Mayor Morgan? Oh, and there's Councillor Pelosi as well. Great. Any discussion on those items? Okay, seeing none. I'll call the question on the consent items.
I vote yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0.
On to items for direction. First one is a request for delegation status from Anna Maria Velastro, and it's regarding the public notice policy. I wonder if the potential delegate is in the building. So we have the person that's requesting delegation here at City Hall. As always, it's up to the committee to decide if we hear the delegation today or at a future meeting. Councillor Van Holst, you go ahead and tell me what you want to do.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to hear the delegation today.
So you're moving that?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Kaibaga, and I see Councillor Pelosi wants to second that. And Councillor Kaibaga, did you have a comment?
No, I don't. I just wanted to second it.
Oh, sorry, Councillor. And your voice does sound like it's troubled, so take it easy. Did you have a comment, Councillor Pelosi? No, okay. So I'll just call the question on that.
Mayor Holder? Councillor Kaibaga?
I vote yes.
Mr. Mayor, we're voting on receiving a delegation today. The delegate is in the building, so the committee has moved to receive the delegation. If you want to vote verbally, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Till we hook it up. The answer is yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
So Ms. Velastro, I believe you are in committee room 5. If you want to step up to the microphone, and you know the drill, you have 5 minutes to address the committee.
Do I do anything here? I thought I had 10 minutes, but that's okay. If everyone has read the submission, I don't have to reread it, and I can use my time to just have a dialogue with the committee members. I'm just seeking direction from the committee on how do you want me to reread this again, or do you want to just talk about it? I can reread it if you want. I have 5 minutes, so.
Hold on one second. Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you. I think Ms. Velastro laid out her position very clearly. I'm sure we've all read it. I certainly have. And if she just wants to have any additional comments beyond what she's written, and then we can maximize her time.
Okay. Do you have anything that you'd like to add or highlight to your written submission, Ms. Velastro?
I don't do a lot of delegations, and I'm hoping I can go away today with a decision on the public notice policy from the committee. I put the rest in there. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate place. I know my neighbors. So we would like a comment about helping my neighbors fix their fence, and also how we replace some of the topsoil, like how we restore some of those damaged areas. And I guess I can follow up with enforcement on zoning. I don't know if this is the appropriate place to talk about zoning. In addition to what was written in the photographs, I am hoping for a decision on amending the public notice policy, and a decision on helping my neighbors fix their fence. They don't want to go to small claims court, they told me, because small claims court doesn't have a mechanism to actually retrieve funds even if they were to win. So they don't want to go through that process. And I don't know if they should have to go through that process. So if you have any questions, I'll take your questions for my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Velastro. So in your submission, you speak quite specifically about the policy and amending the public notice policy. So I'll get staff comments on that, but you've also added that there are neighborhood concerns about the fence that was damaged and how that might get repaired, and also repairing other damaged areas to the topsoil, et cetera. So I'm first going to go to city staff and get their comment on your submission as well as these added items.
Through the chair, it's Oris Catholic here. You can hear me fine?
Yes, we can hear you.
So by way of background, this matter came before committee last January in 2020, and I provided direction at that time that any new privately owned lots which wish to partner with the city in terms of managing their commercial parking would go through a PPM for site plan approval. If council wishes to amend the public policy regarding public notification, city administration would have no objection to that. With respect to any enforcement issues on that property, I could indicate that enforcement is still ongoing, and as such, I cannot provide any further information in a public setting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Katolik. Are there questions or comments from the committee? Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, Madam Chair. There seems to be residents with a claim against the city. Have they been directed to the claims department?
No. Is that something we can do? Oh, do I have to-
Sorry, Ms. Velastro. I believe the parking lot itself in question is private property, but I'll go to Mr. Katolik to see if he can comment at all about your question.
Through the chair, any claims made would go through our risk management department. However, this is private property, so it's an issue between two private property landholders.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions or comments from committee? It sounds like Mr. Katolik has said civic administration is willing to consider amending the policy. I believe that might need a referral back to staff to report back to this committee on how the policy would change, what that would look like. Councillor Van Holst, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to make that referral or move the referral.
Any other comments, questions, or a seconder? I'm not seeing any activity from committee, but I would be willing to second that motion to refer the public notice policy back. I know part of the concern when this parking lot issue came forward to council was that people were frustrated that they had not been notified of this change that the city was proposing. And the reason for the lack of notification is my understanding is the land was already zoned for the use that was being proposed, and it was just the city's proposed involvement in managing this parking lot that caused some of the disruption amongst the neighbors. And so they had been hoping to see the policy amended so that they would in the future get some kind of notice if this kind of thing were to happen again. And it sounds like city staff are willing to look at that policy and see if there is a way that they could provide notification in a circumstance like this where the rezoning isn't needed, and therefore there's no requirement for notification under the Planning Act, which would have been the case if rezoning was needed. So that's why I would be willing to second this, but I look to the rest of the committee to see if they have comments or questions about this whole thing. Deputy Mayor Morgan, and then the mayor, and then I'll go back to you, Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, I'm not generally adverse to looking into improving policy. In this case, I'm not sure that we do want to get into a situation every time where something that is allowed to be done on a piece of property requires notification. I have lots of development in my ward, and when the development is done within the existing rules and zoning, it proceeds when it's ready to happen, and people can look up what the zoning is and what's allowed on that particular property. I know that there's a component of municipal involvement. If the committee wants to look into whether that, triggers something different, certainly I think that's the only piece for me that really that little nugget is what would say, sure, we could look into it, but I certainly don't want to get into a circumstance where for every time that something happens, on a piece of property, that we have to provide notice if it's within the existing allowable zoning. So, but I'll support the committee's direction on this, and I just wanted to provide those comments.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll go to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Mr. Katolik. So we vote to move this back to staff look at it. Do you have I guess I'm trying to understand what it is we're looking to resolve, that where there isn't already a process in place. So I guess my question, Chair, through you to Mr. Katolik is there currently in existence a policy or process in place where either A, we would generally give notice, B, require the private individual who's responsible for a project give notice, be it developer otherwise, or C, where where a resident can go for either recourse. I'm just trying to think what taking this back to staff gives us when it's done, please.
Mr. Katolik.
Yes, through the chair, there is no formal public participation policy when the municipality is contacted by a private landholder to manage their commercial parking lot. However, I indicated last January that I would provide direction should we get further requests from private property holders in that regard. I could say that since January, obviously during the pandemic, we have had 0 requests to manage anyone's private commercial parking lots through our municipal parking lot management system. So putting it in a civic or council policy would simply provide further direction into the future should any requests be made to city administration. But currently there is an internal directive that a PPM be held.
I'm sorry, can I say something? I don't know how to get in queue.
Go ahead, Ms. Vala. Oh, hold on. Mr. Mayor, are you finished?
Well, I wanted to extend one more question to Mr. Katolik based on that response. So are we creating a policy then? Are you suggesting we're creating a policy for a problem that doesn't exist? Help me understand that, please.
Through the chair, I would say that is a correct and valid statement. Currently, when we get requests to manage commercial parking lots, there is an amendment made to the parking and transportation bylaw, which goes before council. But in this case, prior to formalizing an agreement with the property owner took some actions themselves without going through the formal site plan approval process. And that is the reason I indicated last January at committee that perhaps it would be a useful and transparent process to have public participation meetings in that regard.
Thank you.
Did you want to add something, Ms. Velastro?
Right, so my understanding is that municipal parking lots officially do not have to go through a public participation meeting, but private parking lots do. And we have one in my neighborhood right now that is in front of you. It's owned by Fari. It's open. It has to go through a public participation meeting because it's private, but the municipal ones do not. And I did an access to information request, and that's not what the record showed. This property owner did run a parking lot illegally that Mr. Katolik shut down. It was shut down, and then he approached the city about legalizing these activities. And the property owner was under the impression that they had gone through the formal process, and he went forward. So somewhere there was a miscommunication, not just with the neighborhood, but with the property owner. He spent lots of money preparing the site because he was under the impression, that's my understanding. I'm not trying to speak on his behalf, but that's my understanding. So, I mean, there is a process. We have another parking lot right now, privately owned, that is going through a public participation meeting. It is zoned for a parking lot. It still has to go through a public participation meeting. It's expiring, it's tender, and they're asking for 3 more years. And we're just asking for the same thing for the municipal parking lots, which my understanding is they do not have to go through a public participation process, even if it's zoned for parking.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Velastro. I'm going to go back to you, Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'll look to staff for some clarification. It seems like there's 2 issues here, and I want to make sure that we're doing something of value. So a parking lot owner could hire anyone to enforce the parking lot. Are we suggesting in what we've moved and seconded is that if the city is approached to to manage to enforce the parking lot, then we would have to give notice out to the residents, because I don't see that would necessarily be of particular value, because someone could choose anyone. However, the other issue seems to be whether or not municipal parking lots, should we create them, require some public notice. So I guess I need some clarification now on what's being discussed or what's being requested.
Okay, Mr. Katolik.
Through the chair, that's exactly correct in your first comment, Councillor Van Holst, that the PPM would be simply for site plan approval for the city managed private lots. And in some cases, some site plan works have to be undertaken. And that would simply be the outcome of the policy, the public participation policy in this case. In terms of other municipal parking lots, we do not go back to council every 3 years to seek approval, because it is simply a management contract that we are engaged with the property owners, and the property owners may at any time choose not to continue to work with the city and seek a private parking lot administration and enforcement of their private lots. But once they become municipal lots, then we do the enforcement and administration, and we have a cost sharing program that we engage with the private parking lot owners.
Councillor?
Okay, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, there seems to be still a little clarification needed here. So when we're talking about municipal parking lots, are these always lots properties that are owned by the city, or are in some cases we lease the property and for a municipal parking lot and enforce it?
Through the chair, we have city-owned municipal parking lots, and we have privately owned lots that the city administers and enforces at. So we have both.
Okay, so but the privately owned ones, are those considered municipal lots?
Through the chair, yes, they are.
Okay. And do we also enforce, or I believe that we make those enforcement services available to purely private lots as well, do we not?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, so there's really three sort of situations that are possible here. And let me ask then, if, okay. So what's being requested is that if we start up a new municipal lot that's owned by someone else, there should be public notice that's not already given?
Through the chair, my understanding of the request is that only when it's newly created and requires site plan approval.
Okay, so if we're giving public notice in situations where site plan approval is required, that seems like something we generally do. Is that not right?
Through the chair, in some instances we do, but in others we do not. So it all depends on what type of development. If it went through a rezoning and simply is then going through the site plan approval process, not in all cases is it a public participation meeting.
Okay, thank you. But what's being requested here is that in all cases when we're talking about a municipal parking lot, that site plan should be provided, we should provide notice to the public that surrounds it.
That's correct. So if council so wishes to go forward with this policy, it should be very clear that these are newly created commercial parking lots administered and enforced by the municipality.
Okay. Well, in that instance, I don't see a problem moving forward with the referral. So thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate staff for the clarifications.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I just want some clarity based on the back and forth discussions from the last few speakers. Mr. Katolik mentioned earlier on that he had adopted a new administrative practice of providing notice in circumstances. So what is actually going to change if we look into this and we make the change as suggested? Is this actually something new, or have you already adopted this as a practice?
Through the chair, absolutely nothing will change. However, it'll be more formalized if it's a city policy, but we've already given direction to city staff, so absolutely nothing will change.
Okay, so what will change? I'm sorry.
Ms. Velastro, no, please, we're discussing this and we're getting
Okay.
information from the Civic
Okay.
Administration, so please.
So I'll just be in queue then.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Katolik.
I'm finished with my answer.
Deputy Mayor.
I'm finished with my questions.
So I have a question myself for Mr. Katolik. We're talking about notification, and I think for me, notification doesn't necessarily always mean a PPM. So are you suggesting that we would have to have a public participation meeting? So as an example, we give notification when holding provision is removed on a property that's being rezoned and it's gone through all the steps and stages. And I know this because it's happening right now in Ward 5. Area residents have received notification that the holding provision is on the next agenda to be removed or on a coming agenda. And it allows the public a chance to provide their comments through email or telephone or whatnot. But does it, are you saying that this would require a PPM or not, Mr. Katolik?
Through the chair, we would require that public notice be given. And if there is wide community interest, then certainly they could ask for a delegation status.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee? Okay. So I'll call if we're ready to vote.
I have one comment. I just want to speak on my own behalf of what I'm asking for. Okay, so what I'm asking for is that the policy be formal so that residents know it's a policy. Okay, I understand that the civic administration is wanting to do this procedurally, internally, but that doesn't notify residents that this is here.
So Ms.
And that's the
Velastro,
whole
you're
point.
your submission was very clear and
Okay,
we've heard
but
through your
thank-
comments, so we know what you're looking for.
Okay.
We have a motion on the floor that's been moved and seconded, and the committee is ready to vote on this. So I'll call that vote. Oh, hold on one second. The clerk is going to read out the motion.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to be clear with the wording of the motion. I have crafted this directing civic administration to report back, and this would be as part of the ongoing scheduled council policy review. So the motion reads that the civic administration be directed to report back as part of the scheduled council policy review with respect to the addition of a notice provision related to the establishment of city management of newly created private parking lots in the public notice policy. It being noted that the Corporate Services Committee received a communication from A.M. Velastro with respect to the notice policy.
Councillor, as a mover, are you good with that? Okay, I'll call the vote on that then. Thank you, Ms. Velastro. Thank
For listening, thank you.
Chair, I'm having some difficulty with my vote. I'll vote yes.
you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kayabага,
I vote yes.
closing the vote, the motion is passed 5-1.
So we have, the next up are 4 applications for issuance of proclamation. One also has a motion that I would like to put on the floor, which is the one, 4.5. So I wonder if the committee would like to deal with 4.2, 4.3, 4.4 separately, or if there is a will from the committee to put all 3 of those proclamation requests on the floor at once. I go to you to see what you would like to do. Mr. Mayor.
Chair, I don't think there's been a proclamation that we have turned down, and we're still going through this pilot period, as I understand from the clerk in my recent discussion I had. So I have no issue with having those put on the floor as one group.
So that would be, are you moving that, Mr. Mayor, 4.2, 3, and 4?
No, I'm not, but I was responding to suggestions as to whether that made sense, and I think that
Okay.
makes sense.
Thank you. Do I have a mover? Councillor Pelosa, and seconded by Councillor Kayabага. Are there any comments or questions on those 3 proclamation requests? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you. So for 4.5, application for the proclamation, as well as an added motion from myself. And I believe the clerks have set that up to be like a 3-part, 2 or 3-part motion, 2-part motion. So I wonder if I could pass the chair to you, Vice Chair Van Holst, so that I can speak to this.
Yes, so I'll go to the chair to speak to item 4.5.
Thanks very much. And I believe I have a seconder as well in Councillor Kayabага, so I'm pleased with that. I'm happy to move this forward. World Press Freedom Day is coming up, May 3rd, I believe. And I think it's important, as other municipalities have done, to recognize the crucial role that a free and fair press plays in a democratic society. With all of the things that have been taking place in the world over the last few years, and especially with the pandemic, the ability for the public to have access to information that, especially in the era of a pandemic, could be crucial to their very survival. I think it has brought out into stark relief the absolute importance of that the media plays in our society. I do want to point out as well, when we see events that have happened south of us to our neighbor to the south, and we see the polarization that has taken place there, and there absolutely, in my view, was a role that the media played in that polarization. And I think this is also an opportunity for us as a society to ask the media to do better, to learn from mistakes that have been made in other jurisdictions, and to not contribute in any way to that polarization that's been taking place. So there is a responsibility on our part to support the ecosystem, to create a healthy and strong media sector. And there is a responsibility, a very, very grave responsibility on the part of the media to get the information that the public needs to make the decisions that are made. That's my submission, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll look to the mayor.
Thanks very much. I don't have a problem with most of the motion presented by Chair Cassidy. The piece I struggle with is in the fifth line. It says, and urges the federal government to move quickly to pass legislation to ensure an ecosystem for a healthy news media to serve all Canadians. You know, I rail when the senior levels of government try to tell us what to do. I truly, truly do. And I recall when I was a sitting member of federal parliament, when other levels of government went outside their lanes and said, this is what we think you should do, or this is what we are urging, or this is what we are telling you to do. I think everything that the councillor is looking to accomplish is accomplished without the exception of putting it in the face of the federal government. And by the way, I could care less what senior level of government it is in terms of staying within our role and responsibilities. And I support World Press Freedom Day. I'm prepared to support that fully. I'm prepared to support the challenges associated with media around the world, particularly in this day and age. And I'm even comfortable with the motion that Councillor Cassidy has put forward, save and accept the reference of telling another level of government what they have to do. You can call it urge, you can call it what you will, we're telling them what to do. This came up on another issue recently in council. And I have to tell you, we have to be mindful, colleagues. I struggle with where our responsibility lies. And I can understand the emotive arguments that may come forward to say how challenged the media is, and I get it. Oh my gosh. All you had to do was look at Larry Cornese's recent article, Chair, and he got after us. But I'm not prepared to be squeezed by media pressure to support media, because I support media and I'll support World Press Freedom Day. So my suggestion is this: as if it's contrary, then the clerk will rule me out of order. But I would like to suggest that we carry forward with Councillor Cassidy's letter, and I'd amend it, or her motion, and I'd amend it to exclude the words "and urges" and ends with all Canadians. Forwarding this to area municipalities, MPs and MPPs, great. But to tell them what they have to do is inappropriate. So that would be my amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll go to Chair Cassidy to see if she's would consider striking and urges the federal government to move quickly to pass legislation to ensure an ecosystem for a healthy news media to serve all Canadians. If striking that would be a friendly amendment.
So I don't consider that a friendly amendment. Is there room to play with the wording itself? Possibly. However, really what this does is supporting the direction that the federal government is already moving in. So throughout COVID especially, the federal government has provided, as they have with many sectors in our society, they've provided financial relief to media outlets as they've struggled through the pandemic, just like most of our society has struggled through the pandemic. They are, moving in the direction of legislation to create this ecosystem that we're talking about in this motion. If the mayor wants to move his amendment specifically to strike those words and get a seconder for that, then, we can vote on that. But if I were to change the words at all, it would be supports the federal government rather than urges, supports the federal government in their moves or in their move to pass legislation to ensure. So those would be the words that I would choose, but I wouldn't strike it completely.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm just going to go back to the mayor to see if he would be fine with that sort of a change.
I think that change is better than the original motion. Before I'm prepared to accept that, though, Chair, through you, I'd like to ask Councillor Cassidy to put forward the motion that if the federal government is already going and doing this, why are we, what's the point?
I think with, through you, Mr. Presiding Officer, my apologies. I'm assuming that you're recognizing me.
Yes, Councilor.
Thank you. As we have done on a number of important issues that come before this council, I think it's extremely important that as municipalities have done across the country, this is similar motions to this have been passed across Ontario and across the country. And I think the support coming from municipal governments, the recognition of the vital role that media plays in our society and in the functioning of our very government, I think it's extremely important that we show this support and that the federal government sees this support coming from municipal councils across the country so that they continue to move in this direction.
Okay, thank you. I'll go
Sure.
to, I'm going to go to the other members of our committee. Councillor Morgan.
Thanks. So I just wanted to add some information to the discussion. First off, I think Councillor Cassidy's adjusted language is good. I would also say that this issue has already been elevated to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and discussed at its committees. And it was deemed, a good discussion and an appropriate discussion. The final wording of any sort of action that the FCM would take has not been determined yet, but a good discussion at committees. In fact, Councillor Kaibaga was part of those discussions on the committee she sat on, and I believe even moved the motion that made it before the board. So, this is something that is of a concern at that level. I think the language that Councillor Cassidy said as an adjustment is more in line with the kind of discussions that have been had at that level. And, I think it's okay for us to join other municipalities to pass such a similar motion. Again, the way that it works at the FCM, and perhaps this alleviates some of the mayor's concerns, is through the FCM, the lens gets put on it. Is this a municipal issue that also involves the federal government that we should be lobbying on, and then moves it forward there? So, by forwarding this onto the FCM, it would certainly be put through that particular lens at that level before the FCM would engage in lobbying on it. So, so we do that for each and every one of our motions, and I understand the concerns about telling another government what to do, for sure, and we all don't like it when we get that. And the mayor makes an excellent point. I think what the FCM does with this sort of stuff is try to layer that on to say, where is it appropriate that municipalities are engaging with the federal government on issues that are impacting municipalities? So the new language, I think, if Councillor Cassidy makes that adjustment, is good and would align with what's being done.
Thank you, Councillor. And at this point, I'm going to go to Councillor Pelosa, but first ask that perhaps our clerks or the mover would just work on that motion or that wording so that we have something specific to vote on. Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. And to the discussion we're already having today, I was not comfortable with the original language, so I would be more inclined to support it with the changes being made. Also glad for Deputy Mayor Morgan's comments in regards to FCM. That's who we have for advocacy on our behalf. We're part of them, and I'm more comfortable elevating ourselves and our concerns through them as municipalities come together and advocate for what they believe in through there. My question for the mover and seconder is, within this, it said to be forwarded to area municipalities if council passes this. Can you tell me what you define area municipalities as being? Is it just our neighboring communities? Are you thinking Southwestern Ontario? Like, how far?
Councillor Cassidy, perhaps you'd answer that question.
Thank you. So first of all, the resolution's been updated. If you refresh your screen, you can see it. That part, Councillor Pelosa, has actually been stricken from the motion. That was an earlier version of the motion that made it to the printed form, and it shouldn't have. But because we have a policy here at City of London to not go directly to area municipalities. We go through FCM and AMO. So that's why AMO and FCM are in there, and it's no longer includes going to area municipalities.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the clerk was going to provide a similar clarification, but that's fine. So I'll look for any further comments from the committee. So I don't see any hands up, but I know we have this issue of whether or not to make comment to the federal government. So is there, I guess I'll look to the mayor to see if he's fine with the new wording. Perhaps I could ask the clerk to read out that particular sentence.
Thank you. Through the chair, the concluding clause, portion of the clause in Part B reads, and supports the federal government in passing legislation to ensure an ecosystem for a healthy news media to serve all Canadians.
Okay, well, I'll ask again if there are any further comments. Seeing none.
The mayor has, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Councillor, the mayor is waving his hand frantically there.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't see the mayor on my on my list right now.
I'm eminently forgettable.
There he is.
Thank
Okay. Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm eminently forgettable, but in this occasion, I'd like to thank Councillor Cassidy. I think we can get to the same place with the rewording, because I think it shows respect to various levels of government. I like how you compromised it and found the right language.
Okay, thank you. At that, the motion has been, I should go to the seconder and say, does the seconder approve of the amendment? Okay, thank you, Councillor Kayabaga. So seeing no further comments, I'll put this motion on to a vote.
Motion is passed 6-0.
You're muted, Councillor. I assume you're passing the chair back to me.
Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. So there are no deferred matters. I'll look to committee to see if there's additional business. See none. Then we can move to the confidential portion of the agenda there.
Chair,
So go ahead.
I wasn't fast enough, but I would like to add a reason to go in camera. The clerks have the language for me. It's to ask an HR personnel related question. And I wonder if Ms. Westlake Power could read out the additional reason that I'd like to add to the in-camera portion.
Okay, so there are 4 original reasons to go in camera that are shown and listed on the public agenda. And the clerk will read the added matter that Deputy Mayor Morgan would like to speak of in camera.
Thank you through the chair, and presuming that Councillor Morgan is also going to move the motion for the other items as well. The additional matter would be a matter pertaining to personal matters about an identifiable individual with respect to employment-related matters, advice which is subject to solicitor-client privilege, and advice and recommendations of officers and employees of the corporation, including communications necessary for that purpose. So for clarity, the motion that is being moved is for the 4 items which appear on the public agenda and the 5th item, which I have just read out.
Councillor Kayabaga.
I'll second it.
So Deputy Mayor Morgan has moved for those reasons to go on camera, seconded by Councillor Kabaga, and I'll call the vote on that.
Closing the vote, and the motion is passed 6-0.